Why did I know that we would have to do at least one life sim for Seacember? Oh, hi, everybody, and welcome once again to Seacember! Yeah, we're still doing this. On the episode today, we are going to be talking about Coral Island. But before we get into the game itself, we gotta go over our checklist. Okay, Seacember 2024 checklist. Fishing. Yes, there is indeed fishing in the game. Diving. Yes, there's a whole section we'll talk about in a minute where you dive down into the ocean depths. So, sharks. Well, the thing about it is that I have not really encountered much in the way of sharks, except like one shark person. But I do hear that you can catch sharks, like legendary sharks, like a great white, in the fishing part. So, yes. Pirates. No, this really isn't a pirate game. I can't claim that. Sea monsters. Yes? They're friendly sea monsters, though. But I guess they count. They count. Grog. You can actually, you know what you can do? You can actually brew, like ales and beers in this game. So I'm gonna say yes. Scurvy. No, actually, everyone's pretty healthy in this game. Everyone's pretty healthy. I did not see any scurvy to speak of. So, good? Okay, so Coral Island is a game I'm kind of surprised I haven't talked about on the show before. I was actually a Kickstarter backer for this game years ago, and I played early versions of it before a lot of the newer things were implemented into it. You could definitely see that there were rough patches going on early in the game where there were placeholders for things that were going to be there later. But recently I went back to the game to see all of the new stuff that they've implemented, because it's been a year or two and I thought that it would be useful to go back and start again. Now, one thing that I did have to just cope with is that the original game that I had played was not really going to be available anymore. It was no longer like an early access thing. It was now, the 1.0 release, and so I wasn't going to be able to play the game that I had already sunk, 70 or 80 hours into the first time around. However, I did end up with a lot of money because they converted everything that I had done into a monetary sum. So I really was able to hit the ground running this time. Something that I like to do in games like this, which I consider like almost the Stardew Valley cozy games, is I have this thing where I will play Abigail from Stardew Valley. Then Abigail gets to go on adventures all of her own. And this is what I did this time for Coral Island. And if you're ever wondering, yes, Coral Island borrows very heavily from Stardew Valley. It starts where you go off and get a farm on a faraway island retreat called Coral Island. And you get yourself a farm where you get to grow crops and have animals on it. And you get a pickaxe and an axe and a watering can and a hoe, and a sickle. Does any of this sound familiar? It is very, very much a Stardew Valley, but with a different coat of paint, a totally different art style, and in a lot of ways, much more. It kind of takes everything Stardew Valley does, and then it says, but what about that, but like more? Could we do that? For instance, the number of NPCs. There's like twice as many NPCs in this game for you to interact with as Stardew Valley had. There are more caves for you to go through in this one than they had in Stardew Valley. There are more kinds of animals for you to raise than there were in Stardew Valley. There is a whole section underwater, where you get to dive into the depths and clean up trash on the ocean floor and restore the ocean. That is obviously not something that you were able to do in Stardew Valley. And yeah, I'm gonna kind of have to relate this all back to Stardew Valley, which I love. It's one of my favorite games, but it's such a one-to-one correlation on so many of these aspects. But they basically took the 1-to-1 and they made it like, well, what about like a 1 to a 1.5? And we add a lot more in there. The art style, though, is really nice. It's got almost a cartoonish aspect to it, with a nice sheen on it, very glossy look to the game. And then when you're talking to people, the character models that they have drawn for all of them are really beautiful in terms of what they've done. Like, it's really nice how they've made all these characters look in their portraits. They've given them individual portraits for the different seasons and everything. Just really nice, surprisingly good quality, considering that this came out of a Kickstarter campaign. I can't complain. While I would say that there's a lot of overlap with Stardew Valley, they do have a different feeling to the game. It definitely has a certain warmth to it because you are on an island and experiencing island life. And that works really until winter, when it's still wintry out, because you still have the seasons. Okay, but what do you actually do in the game? Well, as the newest resident to Coral Island, you are tasked with repairing this old farm that you've been given. It's not like in Stardew Valley where your grandpa dies and leaves you the farm. You kind of just get the farm. You've said that you were coming there, and then they say, here's a farm for you to fix up. And so you get a farm to fix up, and then you're off to the races. But what do you actually do in Coral Island? Well, you do the kind of things you expect to do in like a farming sim. I get my farm, and then I clear out the land, and then I start growing crops, and, getting some barn animals, and raising them. And eventually you get the ability to make artisan goods. You get kegs and casks, and you can start growing fruit trees, and, all of the wonderful trappings that you normally associate with this genre of game. It's just that Coral Island does a really good job at it. There are some really interesting story elements to it, though, as well. It's not just you meeting this wide, very diverse group of characters on Coral Island, but you also get the ability to meet the mer people. I don't think I'm really spoiling anything here, because it's like in the promotional material for Coral Island. You get to meet some mer people. Now, when I first played this game, that was not something that you could really interact with. You couldn't get far enough to get to, like, the mer people kingdom. But they have that in there now. And there's whole quest lines that you can do for the merfolk as well. There's also an element that they've expanded a lot since the early days, which are the giants. Many of the giants are just kids, so they're actually quite small. But the giant village up above is something that gives you access to some new upgrades, like special upgrades to your different farming equipment, and they have quest lines all of their own. This is kind of how they do an incentive to go through the different elemental dungeons, the caves that you go through. You get to the bottom of the earth cave, and you can release the earth giant. You get to the bottom of the fire cave, you get to unleash the fire giant. So there's a whole storyline about essentially like these lost kids that have been trapped at the bottom of these mines, and you have to get them. There is also the goddess of flowers that lives at a lake temple and has tasked you with another one of the traditional trappings of this genre, collectathon. Basically, finding certain fish and crops and creating the correct artisan gear and foraging things so that you can unlock special features in the game. This is essentially Coral Island's version of the town hall that you had to fix up in Stardew Valley. And it works in similar fashion because you can unlock things like the greenhouse or an entire other section of the game that you get to later. I won't talk too much about that, but just trust me, there's another whole area of the game that you unlock through this process. Also similar to games of its genre is that you will have certain festivals that happen on certain days, and you will have a ticking clock, which makes it kind of a management sim so that you can figure out how you can do enough in a day before you have to go to sleep. And if you do not get back to your house and go to sleep by 2 o'clock in the morning, you will faint. And someone will have to find you and bring you back, and you will get charged for the inconvenience. There are so many similarities to Stardew Valley in the whole structure of the game that I really should be talking about the stuff that it does differently. And I'm trying to think what that would actually be. Well, the underwater stuff is definitely new. The idea of like the giants and the merfolk and everything, that is definitely like specific elements to this. I would also say that the museum in this game is definitely much expanded relative to the Stardew Valley one, because in Stardew Valley, the museum was like at the library, and basically they just wanted you to get like one of every type of item. And in this, it goes right down to like collecting fossils of dinosaurs and then having them all on display in the museum so that when you collect stuff, you can actually wander around the museum afterward and you can see all of the skeletons that you've put together and all the different fish that you've caught. And, you know, you can wander around and actually look at it. There's also a lot of rankings to take into account, you know, like your farm ranking and your town ranking and your museum ranking, etc. And by getting better ratings in all of that, it unlocks some special features for you, some new recipes, a lot of stuff like that. You even get into the point where they do like an automated chest system where you can put down essentially conveyor belts. And you can put a bunch of your crafting stations, like kegs, in certain places and say, hey, I want to put, you know, a bunch of blueberries in my chest here. And then they'll go through and just fill a bunch of your kegs. It's like quality of life stuff, which they're still working on to this day. So I think that stuff like that just makes the whole thing flow really well and gives some neat, innovative ideas for the game. The festivals, unlike when it originally released, have a lot of actual stuff to do in them. Usually there's a few activities that you can take on at any one of these festivals, and so you'll do races, and you'll do, you know, target practice, or whack-a-moles, or a whole variety of different things, so that you can get some special prizes. And this is very true of a lot of these festivals, but I think that they just tried to, again, raise the bar a little bit by just the sheer number of stuff that you can do. And of course, raising your relationships with all of the various characters in the game. This is true of Coral Island as much as any of the games in its genre. I did find that, having remembered how these games work in my mind, if you want to give gifts to everybody and you just don't want to do it every single day and track everybody down, great opportunity to do that is on festival days, because everybody's in one area and the timer has stopped. So load up on whatever you use to ingratiate yourself to the masses. I usually used maple syrup, or you can even use like cane juice, because everybody seems to like that. No one has negative reactions, at least, to it, so I was like, oh, here, you just take this. Just load up on that and just hand it to everybody immediately. You can raise your ranks with everybody so quickly. And it is worth doing, just because, one, you get specific interactions, which moves storylines forward, but then they also give you things like recipes and sometimes just dishes that they will send you through the mail. One of the problems that Coral Island has is also one of the trappings of this genre, which is that at a certain point it stops becoming a game where you're making a farm, and it starts to become an industry sim, where I need to figure out how to, like, turn my farm into a winery and just collect all sorts of fruit, put them into kegs to make juice, and then turn that juice into wine. Or something that I did quite a bit, which was build my bee houses, and then put a bunch of flowers into an automated chain to make a bunch of honey, put them into barrels so that I can make mead, and then sell the mead for huge profits. I did enjoy doing that. That was one of the fun things about the game, too, is just seeing what you can actually interact with. And sometimes I had to look it up, because one of the things you're supposed to throw into the Goddess of Flowers checklist is kimchi, and I did not know what that was or how I was supposed to make it. And I had to find out that I had to, like, pickle vegetables, and then I could put those into a barrel to age it, and that makes your kimchi. These elements are very interesting to see how they interact with each other. Sometimes, though, I did feel like I should be able to pull something off that I wasn't able to do. Like, for instance, you can make cane juice out of sugar cane in your kegs, but I can't age it to make rum. I also couldn't take, like, my potatoes and turn my potato juice from those kegs and make it into, like, vodka. That would kind of make sense. Sometimes there are certain, like, grains that can't be used to create alcohols, but then there are some other kinds of grains that can't necessarily be used to create flour, so you have to kind of know about the specifics of each product that you do. This isn't a problem specifically with Coral Island, but maybe one day down the road, you'll be able to have more of these interactive elements, because previously a lot of these weren't in there, and I know that they're still updating it as time goes on. I can't really complain overall about Coral Island, though, because not only did I play it for, I don't even remember how long the first time through, but now that I've played it this time through, I've been able to get to, like, year 3 now, and that takes a huge time investment to do that, to see how you can improve upon things and do better and build up your stamina so that you can compete in competitions better, and seeing all the things that you can unlock as seasons go on and get better at actually making your crops, building your crops, maintaining them, being more efficient over the course of time. It does get to the point where it's all about efficiency and not really about the fun of just kind of chilling out on your, island adventure. But that is true of most of these sims. And realistically, if you just didn't want to do that and just kind of wander around and explore and just spend your day doing that, the game doesn't really punish you all that much for trying. So, kind of just live the way you want on Coral Island. You should try it out. If you've liked Stardew Valley or Harvest Moon or any of those sort of games, then yeah, Coral Island's going to be very similar to that. But I feel like what they've tried to do is just turn that dial up to 11 to make it more, just larger than you would get from other games in the genre. Alright, enough with the island adventure. We gotta ground ourselves again. It's time to go back to the depths. Oh no. Oh no, it's time, isn't it? Alright. Stay tuned, because next week we're gonna need a bigger boat.